That brings us to our last core process, which is application. Now, we all know what application is. It's practice. But there's something critically important. Don't miss this. Application only contributes to learning when it's partnered with instructive feedback. In other words, you can't say to students, okay, everybody do the next 25 problems. I'll be back at my desk answering emails from your parents. You can't do that because that means they are not actually engaged in learning. During application, you've got to be walking around and saying, hey, that's right on track. Keep doing that. Take that same process and do that with the remaining problems. You're right on track. Oh, over here, you know what? This strategy you're using doesn't seem to be working. Let's figure out why and how we can change the strategy so that you'll be more successful. You've got to be engaged in those one-on-one conversations in order for application to be contributing to student learning. Otherwise, you're not engaging them in learning, you're testing them. And until you've engaged them in all these 4 core processes, you are nowhere near learning or long-term memory. So one of the takeaways from this is, boy, when I engage my students in application, I've got to be providing feedback. I think about my father. He taught me how to change the flat tire on a car. How did he do it? He showed me, and then he had me do it. And what did he do while I did it? He stood there and said things like, don't forget to loosen the lug nuts before you jack up the car. Some of you are looking at me like, why is that important? Trust me, it is. Okay? He'd say things like, that's high enough, when I'm getting crazy with the jack and so forth. That's what makes application part of learning. It's that feedback. I could talk for an entire hour on feedback. I'll share one thing with you. There is nothing that research has identified that a teacher can do that increases student achievement more than increasing the amount of instructive feedback they give to students. It is that powerful. How can we engage students in application? One way is to have them summarize. Now, if you think of summarizing, that sounds kind of strange for application. Yeah, but if you're teaching concepts and ideas, like if you're teaching something in social studies, for example, engaging them in summarization forces them to use skills that they've already mastered pretty well and apply those skills to this new information. Summarize today's class. Take 5 minutes at the end of class and say, summarize the information that we looked at today. Look back at your notes and put it into a summary. Write me a paragraph. Here's a form that Gloria Houston uses that I think is really effective. In class, what 3 things we did in class today? And then finish the rest of the prompts. I learned, I think, I plan to. That's a nice scaffold for students. Because if you just say, okay, everybody summarize, you may get that deer in headlights look, like what? But this gives them a nice scaffold. So summarizing is one way of engaging them in application, and you know the other, practice and homework. Practice when they're practicing in class, they're doing something in class, and when we assign them homework. Now remember that application is only effective with feedback. So when you assign homework, don't do it this way. As the bell is ringing, don't forget tonight to do 40 problems on page 27. You need to get them to start it in class so you can give them some of that feedback to increase the likelihood that they will practice correctly when they get home. If they practice incorrectly, your job just got much more difficult because their brain put the wrong way of doing something through that memory route every time they did it wrong. And it's so much harder to learn something after you've learned the wrong way to do it. So much harder to relearn the right way to do it. So those are some ways we engage students in application. Now, I want to share with you one example from a teacher who took these ideas seriously and put together a unit on the Byzantine Empire. Now, I'm sure you're all up on your Byzantine Empire history, so I won't give it, no, you don't need to be. She, with experience, what did she do? She had them read the textbook, she gave some lectures, she showed some videos, always being mindful of the need for downtime and breaking those up and giving students time to process. What did she do to emphasize comprehension? I love this. Forgive me for reading it, but I'll read it better than I can summarize it. As a new individual from the Byzantine Empire is presented, each student writes the name on an index card. On the other side of the index card, the student records the important information about the individual, including significant actions and their results. The index cards are then sorted into a timeline based on each individual's important actions. In other words, the actions are the basis for the sequence. See how that's labeling and sorting? I love this. Listen to elaboration. For homework, the students create index cards for contemporary people they know. And the teacher said to me, we define that very broadly. It could be family members, friends, politicians, celebrities, anybody who is notable for some significant trait. In the next class session, listen to this is beautiful. In the next class session, the students pair each Byzantine individual with a contemporary individual and use a third index card to explain the comparison of the two. Do you get it? So I've got this Byzantine guy over here. I've got somebody that I know from my life over here. And I'm identifying how they are alike. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful act of elaboration. And then for application, she built on what they had just done with the index cards. Using the resulting Byzantine contemporary pairings as a guide and reference, students developed written summaries of the Byzantine Empire's key individuals. Summaries may include references to the contemporary comparisons to make the summaries more interesting and meaningful. Here's an example of one of the, by the way, this was middle school. This was 7th or 8th grade, I can't remember which. But it was middle school history. And here's an example of one of the students' paragraphs. And this was a couple years ago now, and you'll see that. Theodora, that's the Byzantine individual, Theodora and Michelle Obama seem to have much in common. Both married men who became leaders. Theodora's husband, Justinian I, ruled over the Byzantine Empire. Michelle Obama's husband was elected president of the United States. As a result, both women possess influence even though they were or are not in official positions of leadership. Both women also demonstrate confidence. When Michelle Obama spoke during the campaign to elect her husband, she always seemed self-assured enough to ignore those who criticized her. Theodora showed amazing confidence during the Nika riots. When her husband and his empire were in danger, she spoke confidently and convinced Justinian to stay and fight rather than run and hide. Though they are separated by thousands of years of history, both women influenced their worlds. I said to the teacher, I want to know, tell me about the learning. I said, that's all wonderful, it's beautiful. I said, in my opinion, that instructional design is a work of art. Now, tell me about the learning. And she said, oh, you wouldn't believe it. She said, now they understand the Byzantine Empire so well that it's a reference point for them. I said, what do you mean by that? Well, we'll talk about something going on in the world today, and they say, oh, that's like the Byzantine Empire. Remember when such and such happened? Or remember when so-and-so did this? And she'll say, yeah, that's a great connection. Now, using what you know about the Byzantine Empire, how do you predict this contemporary situation coming to an end? Do you see that? The understanding is beyond what you're going to see on a standardized achievement test. It has actually become something that can inform their thinking. In my opinion, it has equipped them far better to be salt and light, to have influence. Why? Because what they've learned has not just been memorized and regurgitated, it has become a part of their thinking. Because the teacher knew enough and took the time to engage them in working memory processes. The teacher took the time to engage them in comprehension and elaboration and application. So that finishes up the core processes of learning. There's much, much more about this. Here's the commercial part. In my book, there's a statement from Judy Willis. Judy Willis is a neurologist who thought neurology wasn't interesting and challenging enough, so she became a middle school math teacher. There's a statement there from her. And I invite you to, I'll be signing books after this. I'll be glad to talk with you further. If I can be of assistance to you or your school in the future, please don't hesitate to contact me. And thank you for your kind attention this afternoon.